Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to explore a side of the Jolie-Pitt family story that often gets overlooked, and trust me, it's worth your time. We've all heard about the messy divorce between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, a love story that once captivated the world, only to unravel into years of legal battles, custody disputes, and endless headlines. For many of us who watched them build their beautiful, blended family of 6 children, it was heartbreaking to see it all fall apart. And as the drama unfolded, something even more painful happened. Some of their children began to distance themselves from Brad Pitt. Public records, interviews, and court documents have shown that Maddox, Pax, Zahara, and even Shiloh at one point either dropped the Pitt from their last names or openly showed support for their mother Angelina, often at the expense of their relationship with their father. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In the midst of all the noise, one child has stayed quietly loyal, Knox Jolie-Pitt. At just 16 years old, Knox isn't making speeches, isn't grabbing headlines, but his actions, or rather his steadfast silence, speak volumes. He's the only one among the 6 kids who continues to use both Jolie and Pitt in his name. He hasn't made public moves to disown his father. And while much of the public focused on the conflicts, Knox seemed to focus on something else entirely: growing up, learning, and building his own life, without taking sides. This might sound like a small thing, but in a family where emotions have run high and loyalties have been publicly tested, Knox's quiet loyalty is actually quite powerful. It hints at something deeper, perhaps about his character, the way he was raised, or even the bond he quietly maintains with Brad Pitt. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We'll take a closer look at who Knox is, how he grew up in the whirlwind of Hollywood fame, what makes him so different from his siblings, and why many believe he holds a special place, not just in Brad Pitt's heart, but maybe even in the future image of the entire Jolie-Pitt family. Because understanding Knox's story isn't just about following celebrity drama. It's about seeing how one young person's quiet strength can say more than 1,000 headlines. So let's start from the very beginning. Back when Brad and Angelina's love story first captured our hearts and built the family that would one day become a household name. Back in the early 2000s, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were 2 of the biggest names in Hollywood. And when they came together, it felt like a real-life fairy tale. Their romance famously began on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith in 2004, while Brad was still married to Jennifer Aniston. It sparked a media frenzy, with fans and tabloids alike caught up in the drama. But over time, Brad and Angelina, often called Brangelina, became one of the most admired couples in the world. Together, they built a truly remarkable family. They adopted Maddox from Cambodia, Zahara from Ethiopia, and Pax from Vietnam, and then had 3 biological children, Shiloh, and the twins Knox and Vivienne. The Jolie-Pitt family represented something larger than Hollywood glamour. They symbolized global unity, diversity, and a new vision of family. Their travels around the world, attending humanitarian missions, red carpet events, and charity work, painted the picture of a family bonded by love, adventure, and purpose. But as the years passed, the cracks began to show. Behind the smiles and the stunning photos, tensions were brewing. In 2016, Angelina filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Reports at the time mentioned an incident on a private plane that allegedly involved Brad and one of the children, sparking a child welfare investigation. Although Brad was ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing, the damage to the family's unity was already done. The custody battle that followed was one of the most public and painful in celebrity history. Angelina sought sole physical custody of all 6 children, while Brad fought for shared custody. The process dragged on for years, with countless court dates, leaked documents, and heartbreaking headlines. Slowly, the public began to notice shifts within the family dynamic. Several of the children, Maddox in particular, reportedly grew distant from Brad. There were symbolic moves too, dropping Pitt from their last names, publicly identifying more closely with Angelina. For those who had admired the family from afar, it was like watching a beautiful structure slowly crumble. It wasn't just a marriage ending, it was the unraveling of what many thought was an unbreakable bond. Yet, even in the middle of this emotional storm, there were quieter stories unfolding, stories that didn't make splashy headlines but told a different side of the truth. And that's where Knox Jolie-Pitt's story quietly begins to stand out. Because while so much noise surrounded the family, Knox chose a different path, one of loyalty, balance, and silent strength. He didn't make dramatic moves. He didn't pick public sides, he simply kept living, learning, and, perhaps most importantly, keeping his connection to both parents intact. So who exactly is Knox Jolie-Pitt? And what makes his journey so different, and maybe even more hopeful than the rest? Let's take a closer look. Now, when it comes to the Jolie-Pitt children, each one has a story, a unique path shaped by their upbringing, experiences, and choices. But Knox, in particular, has carved out a quiet, yet incredibly compelling journey of his own. Born on July 12, 2008, in Nice, France, alongside his twin sister Vivienne, Knox Leon Jolie-Pitt entered the world already famous. His very first baby photos were reportedly sold for a record-breaking $14 million, with all proceeds donated to charity, reflecting the level of global fascination with the family at that time. But growing up, Knox wasn't pushed into the spotlight like many celebrity kids. In fact, his childhood was remarkably grounded, thanks largely to Angelina Jolie's unconventional parenting philosophy. Unlike most Hollywood families, Angelina chose to homeschool her children, believing that a one-size-fits-all education wouldn't do justice to their diverse backgrounds and interests. Instead of traditional classrooms, Knox had access to private tutors who helped him explore subjects based on his passions. This approach encouraged freedom, creativity, and independent thinking, qualities that are now deeply reflected in Knox's character. One of the most remarkable things about Knox is his wide range of talents. Rather than sticking to a single path, he dived into multiple fields, blending creativity, intellect, and physical strength. For instance, from a very young age, Knox showed a keen interest in STEM subjects, particularly robotics. Reports suggest he attended specialized classes in robotics engineering, a passion that mirrors Brad Pitt's own fascination with architecture and design. While most teenagers might be content gaming or scrolling social media, Knox was learning to build, design, and innovate, skills that point to a curious mind and a bright future. But Knox's talents don't stop there. In true Jolie-Pitt spirit, he also explored the arts, learning to play musical instruments and even trying his hand at design work. Some sources even mention that Knox helped create artwork that was turned into jewelry pieces, blending art with entrepreneurship at an impressively young age. Physically, Knox has been equally active. Unlike many teens living under the pressures of fame, Knox kept a low profile but stayed committed to his health and fitness. He took up boxing and Muay Thai, disciplines that require focus, resilience, and respect, traits that often go unnoticed but are deeply valuable. In fact, in recent years, Knox competed in a martial arts tournament and proudly walked away with a medal. It's a testament not just to his athletic ability, but to his quiet determination. And here's another fascinating detail. At just 9 years old, Knox began taking flying lessons. Yes, you heard that right. While most kids were riding bicycles, Knox was learning how to pilot an aircraft, inspired by his mother's own love for aviation. Angelina once mentioned in interviews how important it was for her children to chase their dreams, no matter how unconventional they might seem. And with Knox, that philosophy clearly took flight, quite literally. Adding to all of this, Knox also decided to learn American Sign Language. It might seem like a small choice, but in a family that values communication across cultures, learning to communicate with the deaf and hard of hearing community reflects compassion and a global mindset, both of which have been pillars of Angelina's humanitarian work. So when you look at Knox Jolie-Pitt, what you see isn't just a celebrity kid living in a Hollywood bubble. You see a young man who's been raised to think deeply, act independently, and embrace the full spectrum of his talents and interests. Someone who's not just defined by his last name, but by what he quietly builds with his own hands and heart. And perhaps most importantly, even while growing into his own person, Knox has kept his connection to both his parents intact. He remains one of the few children who proudly carries the name Jolie-Pitt, a quiet but powerful signal of loyalty and love in a family that's seen its share of heartbreak. Which brings us to the heart of the matter. Why has Knox remained so loyal to Brad Pitt, even when others seem to drift away? And what does that tell us about the unbreakable, if largely unseen, bonds within this famous family? Let's dive deeper into that next. When you think about it, staying neutral, or even loyal, in a situation as emotionally charged as the Jolie-Pitt divorce isn't something you'd expect from a teenager. Divorce, especially a public one, can divide families in painful ways. Feelings get complicated. Loyalties get tested. And for kids caught in the middle, it's often easier to lean toward one parent, consciously or unconsciously, just to survive the emotional fallout. Yet somehow, Knox has managed to walk a different path. He's remained close to both parents, refusing to engage in any public drama or to distance himself from his father. One of the clearest signs of this loyalty is something many might overlook: his name. While several of his siblings, including Zahara, Shiloh, and even Vivienne, have reportedly started dropping Pitt from their last names, Knox has never made that move. He still carries both Jolie and Pitt with quiet pride. It's not just a formality, it's a statement. In today's world, especially for teenagers, names mean something. Choosing to keep his father's name, even after everything that's happened, shows that Knox values his relationship with Brad Pitt enough to preserve that bond publicly. And that, in itself, speaks volumes about the strength of their connection. Beyond his name, there are other subtle signs of Knox's loyalty. Insiders close to the family have shared that Knox, along with his twin sister Vivienne, is among the few children who still spends regular time with Brad Pitt. While Maddox, Pax, and Zahara have reportedly become more distant, Knox's relationship with his father has remained steady, quiet, but strong. There's even evidence in the way Knox carries himself in public. Unlike some of his siblings, who have made bold statements through interviews, fashion, or public appearances, Knox keeps a low profile. He's not out there airing grievances or aligning himself with one parent over the other. Instead, he seems focused on living a balanced life, honoring both his parents, respecting both sides of his family, and above all, keeping the peace. It's important to understand that this kind of maturity isn't accidental. It's likely the result of how Knox was raised, with an emphasis on understanding, empathy, and independent thought. Angelina Jolie herself has spoken about giving her children the freedom to form their own opinions, to discover who they are, without being pressured by anyone else's expectations. And in Knox's case, that freedom appears to have fostered a young man who chooses unity over division, who chooses loyalty over resentment, who chooses, even quietly, to keep his family connected in ways that words sometimes can't. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in what isn't said, in the silent acts of love, loyalty, and resilience that don't make tabloid headlines, but make all the difference in the long run. As we look closer at Knox's bond with Brad Pitt, it becomes clear that this young man may well be a key piece in the family's future healing. Because while fame can tear people apart, it's often the quiet strength of family, the willingness to forgive, to stay connected, to hope, that has the power to bring them back together again. And in the case of the Jolie-Pitt family, that hope just might rest in the hands of someone like Knox. Now, let's take a step back and look at how Angelina Jolie's unique parenting style, with its emphasis on freedom and self-discovery, helped shape Knox into the remarkable young man he is today. When we talk about Knox's loyalty, maturity, and diverse talents, we can't ignore the enormous influence of his upbringing, especially the way Angelina Jolie chose to raise her children. From the very beginning, Angelina made it clear that she wasn't going to follow a traditional parenting blueprint. Instead of strict rules and rigid expectations, she focused on giving her children freedom, the freedom to explore, to question, to discover who they truly are. In interviews over the years, Angelina has spoken candidly about her parenting style. She described herself not as an authority figure, but more as a guide, someone who tries to listen more than lecture, and who respects each child's individuality. For Knox, growing up under this philosophy meant he wasn't pushed into any one direction. He was encouraged to follow his passions, whether that meant learning robotics, studying sign language, stepping into martial arts, or even trying out flying lessons at the age of 9. In Angelina's eyes, no dream was too big, no interest too unusual. One powerful example of this can be seen in Knox's early fascination with technology and design. Rather than dismissing it as a childhood phase, Angelina and Brad supported him, enrolling him in robotics programs, giving him tools to create and innovate. This nurturing environment allowed Knox to develop a strong sense of curiosity and confidence, qualities that serve him well beyond the classroom. Another key aspect of Angelina's approach was cultural and emotional education. Angelina, being a global humanitarian, wanted her children to see the world not through a narrow lens, but with empathy and understanding. She encouraged them to learn different languages, to respect different cultures, and to always stay connected to the real-world issues outside of Hollywood's glittering bubble. That's likely why Knox chose to study American Sign Language, a decision that reflects both compassion and a broader view of communication and inclusivity. But perhaps the most profound impact of Angelina's parenting can be seen in how her children, including Knox, handle challenges. They were taught not to fear difficult conversations. They were encouraged to express their feelings, to stand up for what they believe in, and to stay true to themselves, even when the world was watching. In Knox's case, this upbringing appears to have given him a strong inner compass. Instead of getting swept up in the emotional chaos of his parents' divorce, Knox chose a path of quiet resilience. He didn't lash out. He didn't seek attention. He simply remained grounded, maintaining loving relationships with both parents, staying committed to his education and passions, and building a life that reflects who he is, not who the tabloids say he should be. This speaks volumes about the long-term effects of Angelina's parenting philosophy. It wasn't about creating perfect kids. It was about creating strong, thoughtful, compassionate individuals who could stand on their own, even under the harsh spotlight of fame. And as we look to the future, Knox's journey raises an important question. Could this thoughtful, grounded young man eventually help heal the very public rift within his family? Could his quiet example of loyalty, balance, and independent strength be the key to bringing some peace back to the Jolie-Pitt name? Let's explore that possibility next. One of the most distinctive elements in Knox's journey is how deeply it reflects Angelina Jolie's parenting philosophy, a philosophy that, even by Hollywood standards, was refreshingly unconventional. Angelina has often described herself not as a strict authority figure, but rather as a guide for her 6 very unique children. In interviews, she shared that she tries to be very honest and very human with her kids, emphasizing open communication, empathy, and respect. Her goal, she once explained, was to be there to support and develop their unique traits, rather than forcing them into a rigid mold. This free-range, child-led approach meant that Knox, like his siblings, was given the freedom to pursue whatever sparked his curiosity. Whether it was technology, art, martial arts, or aviation, Knox was encouraged to explore without limits, and without the pressure of conforming to anyone else's expectations. Angelina also customized her children's education to match this philosophy. Instead of relying solely on a traditional school system, she opted for partial homeschooling, hiring tutors who could introduce her kids to a much broader view of the world. The goal wasn't just to teach them math and reading. It was to expose them to global cultures, histories, and ideas far beyond what a typical curriculum could offer. As Angelina once said, she didn't want her children to learn about places like Vietnam or Cambodia only from textbooks, especially since some of her children were born there. She wanted them to feel connected, to understand these cultures deeply and personally, not just academically. This interest-driven, global education model explains a lot about why Knox was able to immerse himself so deeply in so many areas at once. He wasn't just dabbling, he was diving into robotics projects, learning sign language, engaging in animal charity efforts, and competing in sports, all with genuine enthusiasm. And it also explains something deeper: his calm, balanced demeanor. Growing up in a household that valued exploration, understanding, and emotional intelligence likely shaped Knox into the grounded young man we see today. Rather than reacting to family challenges with anger or rebellion, he seems to have developed resilience, patience, and a quiet strength, traits that speak volumes, especially given the public pressures he's grown up under. In a world where many celebrity children struggle to find their footing, Knox's steady, thoughtful path is a powerful testament to the impact of Angelina's parenting choices. She didn't just raise a child who could survive fame, she raised a child who could rise above it. And now, as Knox steps further into young adulthood, it's clear that this foundation of freedom, empathy, and independent thinking could play a critical role not just in his own life, but in the future of his family. Because as we're about to see, Knox may hold more influence over the Jolie-Pitt legacy than anyone realizes. Let's take a look at what the future might hold for him, and how he could be the quiet force that helps heal a very public family divide. As we look to the future, one thing becomes clear. Knox Jolie-Pitt's story is just beginning, and it's shaping up to be a promising one. Unlike many teens born into fame, Knox has managed to stay largely out of the tabloids. Instead of chasing headlines, he's been quietly focusing on school, personal growth, and creative projects. In fact, some fans might be surprised to learn that Knox even had a small voice role in Kung Fu Panda 3, a subtle but charming reminder that while he grew up in the shadow of Hollywood, he was never consumed by it. Insiders have shared that Knox has developed a strong interest in technology and engineering, with early ambitions of becoming a tech engineer and software developer. It's a career path that not only taps into his passion for innovation, but also echoes the creative side of his father, Brad Pitt, who famously has a love for architecture and design. And while the public often focuses on the drama surrounding the Jolie-Pitt family, Knox represents something very different: hope. Hope that even after everything, the divorce, the custody battles, the public scrutiny, the bonds of family might still endure. That love, loyalty, and quiet understanding might be stronger than any headline. Some family friends have even suggested that Knox, along with his twin sister Vivienne, might one day play a critical role in healing the family's public image. As one insider put it, if anyone can get Brad and Angelina to make peace, it's Viv and Knox. Because sometimes, it's not the loudest voices that bring people back together. It's the quiet, steady presence of those who never gave up on the idea of family. In many ways, Knox Jolie-Pitt already embodies that quiet strength. He's proven that loyalty doesn't have to be loud, that growing up in the spotlight doesn't mean losing yourself, that carrying both Jolie and Pitt in your name isn't just about legacy. It's about honoring where you come from and believing in where you're going. At just 16 years old, Knox has shown a remarkable ability to stay grounded, focused, and full of heart. And while the road ahead will surely have its challenges, one thing seems certain: Knox Jolie-Pitt is walking it with purpose, kindness, and the quiet power of someone who knows exactly who he is and what family really means. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real happy ending this famous family has been searching for all along.